So the point of this particular video clip is to give you another chance to look at the slides from today's lesson and maybe take your time a little bit more, pause them and think about them in relation to your own work. So the first of the essay clinics, and you'll notice the medical motif running through these, is to look at your introductory paragraphs and consider how you might like to write a better introduction. So as we go into the waiting room, you'll see there's something to read in the waiting room, and you might read a book like this and wonder what could possibly go wrong. So considering what are the conventions of an effective introduction, well, they do these things here, and I think the most important things are the first two. So making sure that the marker of your essay wants to read to the end and actually show the outline of your argument in relation to the topic. When we look at most students' introductions, they're short, predictable, they're prepared, they're not engaging, and they're very poorly presented. Most of them begin in a very predictable way, and if you put yourself in the position of the marker to read the same sort of introduction around about 800 to 1,000 times is very tedious. So here's an example of an essay question that we're going to look at, and we did this in class and we discussed some of these ideas, and maybe you can look at these slides again and write a really good essay in response to this. So the proposal in the question is this: central to the purpose of a novel is the presentation of characters. Writers have to present important characters in ways that engage readers. And your task is to show the extent to which you agree with this view. So at this point you might want to pause this and think a little more about this particular topic and what your argument could be. So most students up and down the country will write a predictable introduction like this, and there's a very clear paradigm or pattern that this student is following. In text title, by author's name, then let me somehow paraphrase the question and give a handy-dandy list of things that I will discuss in my essay. So reading this, we know the novel and we know the author, and if you read down about 5 lines, juxtaposition, biblical imagery, and narrative distance. There are 3 things that this essay is going to contain. And predictably, a marker reading this would probably be bored because this essay opens in exactly the same as hundreds and hundreds of other essays. We can see that there's probably going to be this introduction, a paragraph on juxtaposition, a paragraph on biblical imagery, and a paragraph on narrative distance before we get to some very brief conclusion, which is pretty much this introduction word for word. Let's try and not do that. So what can you do? Here's your recipe for a cure. Be original and show the marker that you can actually think for yourself. Maybe you could have a quotation either from the novel you're writing about or from a secondary source. Show that you understand how the novel is complex and can't be summarized into a very handy list of 3 bullet points. One of the weaknesses of many essays is that it's a shopping list of ideas, and these ideas are not developed fully enough. So maybe you want to show that you understand some of the subtleties of the novel, maybe by using terminology, such as the juxtaposition and the narrative distance that was there in the example. Maybe that could be dealt with in a bit more of a way that shows you understand the complexities of the novel. So here are some things to try and aim to do when you're looking to cure your boring introduction. Here's another example of The Cure. This is The Cure from the 1980s. Robert Smith is in the center. You might want to try and listen to some of their music at some point. So here's the experiment. Let's rewrite the introduction to the essay. And the essay question is there in black. You could pause this video now and write that introduction. So there's the predictable. You want to avoid doing something like this. But here's a better version. You might want to pause it now and read this before listening to some of the comments I'll say about it. So the first comment is that this will get the marker's attention because it doesn't begin in novel's title by author's name. Let me repeat the question. So the quotation there from E.M. Forster, who wrote a book called Aspects of the Novel. You see the student is actually trying to engage with the argument and arguing maybe that it's not just presentation of characters, that there are other elements such as story that are more important. You see that the title of the novel is not mentioned until about halfway through, and then after there we see that some of the ideas that were a shopping list in the previous one, juxtaposition for example, that's listed there as well, in slightly more complex way, a complex web of juxtaposing imagery. And then the last 3 lines, read those again and see how they are very good at showing this student understands the novel and knows the novel. There are 2 quotations in there, Gifted Abomination and The Fleeting Realm of Scent. Now that's quite impressive. It shows that this is a student who knows the novel in detail, even though those 2 quotations come from the first paragraph of the novel. It is at least, creating an engaging introduction. So there are some things that you can do to improve the introduction of your paragraphs. So go and do it. Go and write an essay, write a brilliant introduction in about 10 minutes and take it to your teacher for marking.